The moment the woman slid the envelope across my table, something inside me tightened, not sharply, not suddenly, but like a thread being pulled slowly loose from a fabric I had spent years holding together. "You'll need this tonight," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the kind of certainty that made ignoring it impossible. For a second, I simply stared at her hand resting on the edge of the table. Pale, steady, veins faintly visible beneath thin skin. The hand of someone who had lived long enough to know things they could never unlearn. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, blinking as if that might reset the moment. But she didn't repeat herself. Instead, she gave the envelope a small push toward me, her fingers lingering just a fraction longer than necessary, as though letting go of it required effort. "Do not open it here," she added quietly. Then she straightened. And just like that, she was gone. I didn't follow her. Not immediately. My body remained still, but my mind had already begun racing ahead, trying to catch up with something it couldn't yet understand. "Mom!" Ethan's voice pulled me back. I looked up to see him standing at the edge of the table, wallet in hand. Clara hovered just behind him, her expression carefully neutral. "You okay?" he asked. Too quickly, I nodded. "Yes. Just thinking." I reached forward and slipped the envelope into my purse in one smooth motion, praying they hadn't noticed. But Clara noticed everything. Her eyes flicked briefly to my bag before returning to my face. "About what?" she asked. There it was. That tone. Polite curiosity wrapped around something sharper. "Nothing important," I said. I forced a smile. The kind I had learned to use over the past year, the kind that answered questions without inviting more. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and baked apples, just like it always did. It was one of the reasons I kept coming back. The scent never changed. Unlike everything else. I had started coming here after my husband, Richard Hale, died. Thursday afternoons. Same booth. Same quiet corner near the window. The owner never asked how I was doing. Never offered sympathy. Never looked at me like I was something fragile that might break under the weight of a single wrong word. That silence had become a kind of comfort. Predictable. Safe. Until now. "You really should think about selling," Clara said suddenly, stirring her tea though she hadn't taken a sip. The spoon clinked softly against porcelain. Again. And again. And again. "You've said that," I replied evenly. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "We're just worried about you, Mom." Worried. That word had started appearing more often in their conversations lately. Always delivered gently. Always paired with concern. But never quite landing the way it was meant to. 41 years, I said. They both looked at me. "I've lived on that land for 41 years, I continued. "I know how to take care of it." Clara's lips pressed together briefly before she smiled. "That's not what we're saying." "No. Of course not." Ethan glanced at her. Just for a second. But it was enough. A silent exchange. A shared understanding. The kind that didn't include me. "We're saying it might be time to make things easier," he said. "For who?" I asked quietly. The question hung in the air longer than either of them expected. Clara set her spoon down. "For you," she said. But something in her eyes told me that wasn't entirely true. They stood shortly after that. Too quickly. Too neatly. Like a conversation that had reached its intended conclusion. "We'll cover the bill," Ethan said. "You don't have to. It's fine." They walked to the counter together, leaning close, speaking in low voices. I watched them through the reflection in the window rather than turning my head. I didn't need to hear the words. I could feel them. That was when she appeared. I hadn't heard her approach. Hadn't seen her enter. One moment I was alone. The next. She was standing beside me. Up close, she looked older than I had first thought. Mid-50s, maybe older. Her grey hair was pulled tightly back, emphasizing the sharpness of her features. But it was her eyes that unsettled me. They didn't wander. Didn't flicker. Didn't soften. They locked onto mine as if they had been searching for me for a very long time. "Margaret Hale," she said. Not a question. My throat felt suddenly dry. Yes. That was when she placed the envelope on the table. You'll need this tonight. And just like that, she was gone. This time, I stood. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I turned toward the door just in time to see it swing shut. But when I stepped outside, there was no one. Only the highway. Cars passing. Wind moving through the trees. No sign of her. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Had she really been there? Had I imagined it? Mom! I turned. Ethan stood behind me again. Clara just behind him. Both watching. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a smile. Fine, I said. Too quickly. And for the first time, I felt afraid of something I didn't yet understand. The drive home blurred into fragments. Conversation I didn't hear. Questions I didn't answer properly. The envelope sat heavy in my purse, like it had weight far beyond paper. They dropped me off at the end of the gravel drive. Didn't come inside. Didn't linger. I watched their car disappear down the road. And for a moment, I had the strangest feeling. That they were relieved to leave. The house stood where it always had. White siding. Green trim. Weathered but strong. Home. But as I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, it didn't feel the same. I locked it. Not out of habit. But instinct. The envelope sat on the kitchen table. Untouched. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. Instead, I sat across from it. Watching. Waiting. As if it might reveal its secrets on its own. The house creaked softly around me. The wind pressed gently against the windows. Time stretched. And for the first time since Richard died, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Not grief. Not loneliness. Fear. Deep. Quiet. Unavoidable. I didn't know yet that everything was about to change. That the life I thought I understood was built on something buried. Hidden. Waiting. And that by the time I opened that envelope, there would be no turning back. I didn't touch the envelope until the house was completely dark. Not because I was waiting for something to happen, but because some instinct, quiet and insistent, told me that whatever was inside it didn't belong in daylight. The last light of evening faded slowly through the kitchen window, stretching shadows across the floor until they swallowed the table whole. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, each second landing with a weight that made the silence feel crowded. I made tea out of habit. Chamomile. Richard used to say it helped me sleep. That night, it went cold in my hands. The envelope sat where I had left it, thin and unremarkable. No markings. No return address. Nothing to suggest it held anything more than an ordinary piece of mail. But nothing about that day had been ordinary. I checked the doors again. Front door locked. Back door locked. Windows secured. I even checked the mudroom, something I hadn't done in years. By the time I returned to the kitchen, my heart was already beating faster than it should have been. Enough, I whispered to myself. It sounded like someone else's voice. I sat down, reached forward, and slid my finger beneath the flap. The paper opened with a soft tear that seemed far too loud in the stillness. Inside, a key. It was heavier than I expected. Old. Brass. Its surface worn smooth from years of use, edges softened by time and touch. This wasn't something recently made. It had history. Beneath it lay a small folded piece of lined paper. I unfolded it carefully. 11:32 p.m. Answer. Do not call back. That was all. No, I murmured under my breath. It didn't make sense. None of it did. I checked the clock. 8:51. Nearly 3 hours to wait. 3 hours with nothing but questions. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. No, I said again, louder this time. This is ridiculous. I picked up the phone. Considered dialing Ethan. Then stopped. The memory of the woman's eyes flashed in my mind. Unblinking. Certain. Do not open it here. Why? Why not? My fingers tightened around the phone. Then slowly, I set it back down. Something inside me had already made the decision. I just hadn't caught up to it yet. The hours crawled. At 9:30, I tried folding laundry. I folded the same towel 3 times before realizing I had already done it. At 10 o'clock, I turned on the television. The sound felt wrong. Too loud. Too artificial. I turned it off again within minutes. At 10:45, I sat back at the kitchen table. The key rested in front of me. I picked it up, turning it slowly between my fingers. "What do you open?" I whispered. The metal felt cold. Unfamiliar. And yet, somewhere deep in my memory, there was a flicker of recognition. I frowned. Tried to grasp it. But it slipped away before I could catch it. 11:10. The house felt smaller now. The walls closer. The silence heavier. I turned off all the lights except the one above the sink. The dim yellow glow left the corners of the room in shadow. Safer that way. Somehow. 11:25. I sat perfectly still. My hands folded tightly in my lap. The phone resting on the table in front of me. 11:30. My heartbeat grew louder. Faster. Like it was trying to warn me. Or prepare me. 11:31. I held my breath. 11:32. The phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like glass shattering. Sharp. Violent. Final. I flinched so hard my chair shifted beneath me. For a moment. I didn't move. It rang again. And something inside me snapped into motion. I reached for the phone. My fingers trembling just enough to notice. I answered on the second ring. "Hello." Silence. Not empty silence. Not the kind you hear in an empty room. This was different. There was breathing. Slow. Measured. Close. "Hello." I repeated, my voice thinner now. The breathing continued. Then. A voice. Low. Distorted. As if it were passing through something mechanical. "Margaret." Everything inside me went still. "No," I whispered. Because I knew that voice. Not the distortion. Not the distance. But the shape of it. The rhythm. The weight. I had heard it for over 40 years. "Don't trust Ethan," the voice said. My grip on the phone tightened painfully. "Or Clara." My throat closed. "And do not trust the police." "This isn't funny," I said, but the words came out weak. Shaking. "You're not safe," the voice continued. "The land, that's why they want it." My mind struggled to keep up. To make sense of something that refused to fit into reality. "Who is this?" I demanded. A pause. Then. A breath. "I didn't die the way they told you." The world tilted. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly behind me. "No," I said again. Louder. Stronger. As if that might make it true. "That's not possible." "What happened wasn't an accident," the voice continued. "If you let them take the land, everything I tried to protect will be gone." My legs felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Stop," I whispered. "I don't have much time," he said. He. Not it. He. "They're watching. They're closer than you think." My breath came faster now. Shallow. Uneven. "Tell me who you are," I demanded. Silence. Then. Softly. Almost breaking. I wish I could explain everything. My eyes filled with tears I didn't remember allowing. I wish I had more time. The line crackled. Sharp. Violent. "The truth is under your feet, Margaret." A pause. And then. "You have very little time." The call ended. Just like that. I stood there. Phone pressed to my ear. Long after the silence returned. Slowly. I pulled it away. The screen was dark. No number. No record. Nothing. As if it had never happened. But it had. My hands were shaking. My chest tight. My heart still racing. And deep down. Past the fear. Past the confusion. Past everything I thought I knew. There was something else. Recognition. Because no matter how impossible it was, I knew that voice. And if what I had just heard was true, then my husband hadn't just died. He had been taken. And whatever had taken him was still out there. The next morning, Margaret didn't sleep. At 8:07 a.m., Ethan's car rolled into the driveway, no call, no warning. He walked in like the house already belonged to him. "You look tired," he said, placing coffee in front of her. "I didn't sleep," Margaret replied calmly. His eyes moved around the room, checking, searching. Clara arrived shortly after, holding printed bank statements. "I reviewed your finances," she said casually. "You had no right." Ethan didn't defend her. That silence said everything. Then came the word. "Guardianship." "It's temporary," Clara said. "For your protection." Margaret looked at her son. "You want control. If you don't agree," Clara added quietly, "we'll proceed anyway." That was the moment Margaret knew. They weren't worried about her. They were preparing to remove her. After they left, Margaret went straight to her husband Richard's office. For months, she had avoided it. Now, she understood why. At first glance, everything looked normal. But then she noticed files slightly out of place, documents rearranged, not hidden, prepared. Inside a drawer, she found a letter. "The truth is buried. Silence kept you alive." Her heart pounded. Buried. She searched deeper. Bank records showed secret cash withdrawals. Emails revealed contact with a criminal lawyer. Photos showed strange tire tracks at the edge of their land. And one image. The northern slope. The place Richard had always warned her to avoid. He hadn't been protecting the land. He had been protecting her. That evening, her phone rang again. This time, a man spoke clearly. "My name is Daniel Reeves. Your husband trusted me." He told her everything. There were tunnels beneath her property, old service passages leading into hidden chambers. Perfect for hiding illegal operations. Smuggling. Storage. Disappearing evidence. "Ethan found them years ago," Daniel said. Margaret's breath caught. "Your husband discovered the truth," he continued. "He confronted him. And silence. They didn't mean to kill him. But once it happened, they covered it up." Margaret closed her eyes. Something inside her broke. Quietly. Completely. That night, they came. Ethan. Clara. And a police officer. "We're here to help," the officer said. Margaret knew better. She locked the door. They threatened to force entry. So she ran. Out the back. Into the freezing dark. Through the trees she had known for decades. She reached the northern slope. Dropped to her knees. And dug. Her hands hit something solid. A buried container. "Mom, stop." Ethan's voice shouted behind her. Flashlights cut through the trees. "Give it to me," he screamed. Margaret ran. A car waited beyond the tree line. A woman opened the door. "Get in." Margaret didn't hesitate. Inside the container were flash drives, documents, and a letter from Richard. "You were always stronger than you believed." With Daniel and the woman, Claire, they made a plan. They would force Ethan and Clara to expose themselves. Margaret sent a message. "I'll return it. Come tonight." They came. Of course they did. That night, the house was dark except for one light. The container sat on the table. Waiting. Ethan entered first. Clara behind him. The officer last. "You don't understand what you're doing," Clara said coldly. Margaret looked at her son. "I understand everything. You killed your father." Ethan broke. "I didn't mean to," he said. "It was supposed to scare him." Clara snapped. He was a liability. That was enough. Lights exploded on. Doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the house. "Hands where we can see them." Ethan collapsed. Clara screamed. The officer froze. It was over. Weeks later, the truth was uncovered. The tunnels sealed. The operation dismantled. Ethan was arrested. Clara faced even harsher charges. Margaret didn't visit him at first. When she finally did, he couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She looked at him for a long moment. You chose this, she said. She walked away. The land remained hers, protected by a trust Richard had prepared before his death. He had known. He had trusted her. And she had finished what he started. Now, she walks the fields again. Not in fear, but in truth. Because the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It grows quietly, inside family. And strength. It doesn't fade with time. It waits. Until it is needed most. That night, they came. Ethan, Clara, and a police officer. We're here to help, the officer said. Margaret knew better. She locked the door. They threatened to force entry. So she ran. Out the back. Into the freezing dark. Through the trees she had known for decades. She reached the northern slope. Dropped to her knees. And dug. Her hands hit something solid. A buried container. Mom, stop. Ethan's voice shouted behind her. Flashlights cut through the trees. Give it to me, he screamed. Margaret ran. A car waited beyond the tree line. A woman opened the door. Get in. Margaret didn't hesitate. Inside the container were flash drives, documents, and a letter from Richard. You were always stronger than you believed. With Daniel and the woman, Claire, they made a plan. They would force Ethan and Clara to expose themselves. Margaret sent a message. I'll return it. Come tonight. They came. Of course they did. That night, the house was dark except for one light. The container sat on the table. Waiting. Ethan entered first. Clara behind him. The officer last. You don't understand what you're doing, Clara said coldly. Margaret looked at her son. I understand everything. You killed your father. Ethan broke. I didn't mean to, he said. It was supposed to scare him. Clara snapped. He was a liability. That was enough. Lights exploded on. Doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the house. Hands where we can see them. Ethan collapsed. Clara screamed. The officer froze. It was over. Epilogue. Weeks later, the truth was uncovered. The tunnels sealed. The operation dismantled. Ethan was arrested. Clara faced even harsher charges. Margaret didn't visit him at first. When she finally did, he couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. She looked at him for a long moment. You chose this, she said. She walked away. The land remained hers, protected by a trust Richard had prepared before his death. He had known. He had trusted her. And she had finished what he started. Now, she walks the fields again. Not in fear, but in truth. Because the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It grows quietly, inside family. And strength. It doesn't fade with time. It waits. Until it is needed most.